Stop scrolling. This story will hit you hard. A cowboy finds a beaten 15-year-old girl left to die in the desert. What he does next will restore your faith in humanity. Watch till the end, then like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment. Let's get started. The sun was sinking low over the vast plains of the American West, painting the sky in shades of amber and fading gold. A lone cowboy rode steadily across the open land, his silhouette stretching long against the dust. Years of solitude had shaped him into a man of few words and quiet thoughts. The rhythm of his horse's hooves was the only sound that kept him company. Out here, silence was not emptiness. It was a way of life, one he had learned to accept without question or complaint. He had traveled this route many times before, knowing every curve of the dry earth and every distant ridge. Nothing ever changed out here, and that was what he preferred. But as the evening deepened, something unfamiliar tugged at his instincts. It was not a sound or a movement, but a feeling, subtle, uneasy. His eyes narrowed slightly as he scanned the horizon. The wind carried dust across the ground, blurring the edges of everything, yet something ahead didn't seem to belong. At first he thought it was debris, maybe an old sack or broken wood left behind by passing travelers. But as he drew closer, the shape became clearer, more defined and far more troubling. His grip tightened on the reins. The horse slowed as if sensing the shift in its rider. What lay ahead was not an object. It was a person. A small, fragile figure, partially covered in dust, lying unnaturally still against the earth. The cowboy swung himself down from the saddle before the horse had fully stopped. His boots hit the ground with urgency, kicking up small clouds of dust as he moved closer. Each step felt heavier than the last. When he finally reached her, the truth settled in with quiet force. It was a girl, no older than 15. Her clothes were torn, her face marked with dirt and pain. She looked as though the world had turned its back on her. He knelt beside her, careful not to cause more harm. For a brief second, he hesitated, as if bracing himself for what he might find. Then he gently reached for her wrist, searching for a pulse. It was faint, barely there, but it existed. That small sign of life changed everything. Whoever had left her here was long gone, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions. But for the cowboy, leaving was no longer an option. He glanced around, his eyes scanning the empty plains once more. There was no movement, no sign of danger, no indication that anyone would return. The land stretched endlessly in every direction, indifferent and still. It was just him, the girl, and the fading light. The isolation that once brought him peace now felt different, heavier, almost demanding action. He exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling deep within him. Leaning closer, he softened his expression, though she could barely see him. His voice, rough from years of silence, carried a rare gentleness as he spoke. "You're safe with me now." The words were simple, but they held a promise he had already decided to keep. Even if she couldn't hear him, he said it anyway, as much for himself as for her. In that moment, something shifted inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Carefully, he slid one arm beneath her shoulders and the other beneath her legs, lifting her with steady strength. She was lighter than he expected, fragile in a way that made him more cautious with every movement. He carried her to his horse, moving slowly to avoid causing pain. The animal stood calm and still, as if understanding the importance of what was happening. With effort, he settled her gently onto the saddle, securing her so she wouldn't fall. Once he mounted behind her, he adjusted his hold, making sure she was supported. The sun had nearly disappeared now, leaving only a dim glow across the horizon. Night was coming fast, and the temperature would drop with it. He couldn't stay here. With a quiet signal, he urged the horse forward. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Turning back was no longer an option. As they rode into the deepening dusk, the plain seemed even more silent than before. The cowboy kept his focus ahead, but his awareness remained on the fragile life in his arms. Every breath she took mattered. Every second counted. The world around them faded into darkness, but he pressed on, guided by instinct and a quiet determination. Somewhere beyond the horizon there was shelter, warmth, and a chance, however small, for her to survive. The cowboy's small wooden cabin stood alone against the endless stretch of land, its walls weathered by time and storms. It had always been a place of silence, built for one man and his quiet routines. But now as he carried the injured girl inside, it felt different, crowded with urgency, filled with a fragile presence that changed everything. He laid her carefully on his bed, moving with a caution he hadn't shown in years. The air itself seemed tense, as if the cabin understood that life and loss were standing side by side. He wasted no time. Drawing water from a worn bucket, he began cleaning her wounds with steady hands. The injuries told a story he didn't want to fully imagine, but he focused only on what he could control. Dirt and dried blood were washed away, revealing bruises and cuts that needed care. He tore clean cloth into strips, wrapping them gently around her arms and forehead. Every movement was deliberate, guided by patience rather than panic. He had no formal training, only instinct and determination keeping him going. The first night passed slowly, each hour, stretching longer than the last. He sat beside her, listening closely to her breathing, afraid that any change might mean the worst. Sleep never fully came to him. Instead, he drifted in brief moments of rest, always waking at the slightest sound. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the cabin walls with restless energy. But inside, everything was focused on the girl. Her life had become the center of his world, fragile and uncertain. By the second day, exhaustion began to weigh on him, but he ignored it. He gave her small amounts of water, carefully lifting her head so she could swallow. Sometimes she stirred slightly, her body reacting even if her mind remained distant. Each small movement gave him hope, a sign that she was still fighting. He spoke occasionally, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. His voice remained calm, steady, offering reassurance in the quiet space between breaths. Storms rolled in without warning, dark clouds covering the sky and rain striking the roof in sharp bursts. Thunder echoed across the plains, shaking the ground beneath the cabin. Yet inside, the battle remained silent. The cowboy continued his quiet work, unaffected by the chaos outside. He added wood to the fire, keeping the room warm, making sure the girl didn't feel the cold creeping in. Nature could rage all it wanted. He wasn't letting it take her. Days blurred together, marked only by the rising and setting of light through the cabin window. His routine never changed. Clean the wounds, offer water, watch her breathing, wait. He spoke less now, conserving his energy, but his presence never wavered. There were moments when doubt tried to creep in, when her stillness felt too heavy, too final. But each time he pushed the thought away. As long as she breathed, he would keep fighting alongside her. Then, one quiet morning, something shifted. The light filtered softly through the window, casting a gentle glow across the room. The cowboy sat in his usual place, his eyes heavy but alert. Suddenly, he noticed a faint movement, a small twitch of her hand. He leaned forward, his focus sharpening. Slowly, her eyelids began to flutter, as if she were pulling herself back from a distant place. Time seemed to slow as he watched, hardly daring to breathe. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then filled with confusion and fear. She didn't recognize the room, the man, or the safety around her. Instinctively, the cowboy stepped back, giving her space. He didn't want to overwhelm her. His voice when he spoke was calm and steady, carrying no threat. "You're safe here. No one's gonna hurt you." The words hung gently in the air, offering reassurance without pressure, a quiet promise she could choose to believe. She didn't respond right away. Fear doesn't disappear in a moment, especially after pain. Her eyes remained cautious, watching him, carefully, searching for something she could trust. The cowboy understood. He didn't move closer, didn't force anything. He simply stayed where he was, patient as ever. Time passed in silence, but it was no longer empty. It was filled with possibility, with the slow beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. Over the following days, that fragile distance began to change. She spoke little and he asked for nothing, but small signs appeared, less fear in her eyes, a slight nod when he brought water, a quiet acceptance of his presence. Trust wasn't built with words. It grew through consistency, through actions repeated without expectation. The cowboy never rushed it. He simply stayed, just as he had from the beginning, steady and unwavering in a world that often turned away. And in that quiet, isolated cabin, something remarkable took root. Not just survival, but connection. The storms outside eventually passed, leaving behind clear skies and calm winds. Inside, the battle had shifted, from fighting for life to learning how to live again. Because sometimes, in a world that walks away without looking back, it only takes one person to remain, to stand firm, to care, and to prove that not everyone leaves.